What we do here is go back.
Coming to you live from DBU Audio Studios in Windhoek. This is the Capricorn Group and EY Annual Budget Review broadcasting on our social media channels. A warm welcome to all who have tuned in on this fairly chilly Wednesday morning here in the capital. My name is James Chapman. I'm the Chief Financial Officer at Bank Windhoek, and I will be hosting and moderating this session today. I would like to encourage you to listen to our panel discussions and also post your questions on social media. Our panelists will endeavor to answer these questions during today's session. Turning to our panel, not really a panel that needs very much introduction, but nevertheless, a warm welcome to Honourable Minister of Finance, Ipumushimi, Cameron Kotze, Managing Partner of EY Namibia, and Floris Berg, Chief Economist of Capricorn Asset Management. And then last but certainly not least, the Managing Director of Bank Windhoek, Ms. Berenice Hans. Once again, welcome to you all. We are really looking forward to the views and expert opinions you will be sharing this morning. The COVID-19 pandemic has had an immense impact on the global economy, and we have seen countries going into and coming out of lockdowns on many occasions, whilst central banks and governments are stepping in to support their people and also try and stimulate the economies. The IMF has predicted that the impact of this will be much larger than the 2008 financial crisis. Furthermore, it's also the first time since the Great Depression that the prediction is that both advanced economies and emerging markets will be experiencing negative growth in the next year. And I think in Namibia we have seen the pandemic coming in on the back of an already struggling economy since its downturn in 2016. Some sectors have already been under pressure, and the COVID-19 pandemic has really aggravated that and has also extended a negative impact to many other sectors, affecting all sectors in one way or another. So we are almost, as they often say, in the midst of a perfect storm as we are here today. One can therefore not look at the national budget without considering the impact of this on the economy and also how it speaks to the budget and our country. So on the Namibian economy, without any further ado, we have Floris Berg, Chief Economist from Capricorn Asset Management, as I've mentioned. Floris, what is your view in terms of the impact of this on the Namibian economy, and how is the budget affected by this, or how does the budget affect this?
Yes, thank you, James. First of all, allow me to congratulate the Minister on his appointment. Frankly, I don't know whether I should congratulate him or commiserate with him. Because, yes, we are in a serious predicament, and I think viewers ought to be able to see a chart now that depicts the firm growth rate. And that means that GDP doubles every 6 years at a 12% growth rate. Let me just take this down a little bit, if you don't mind. So we are really in a firefighting mode currently, and the Minister stepped into this crisis, and we wish to wish him all moral support that we can gather. And this firefighting mode that we are in is really, the fire we're fighting is the threat to lives and livelihoods. And it's about the threats to revenue, government revenue, will really be hard hit in this process. For instance, the viewers ought to see a slide perhaps now that depicts tax on income and profits, which is lots of uncertainty still, and it could be even lower. Then on the spending side, simultaneously with this downward pressure on revenue, we had this upward pressure on spending, where there was basically a crisis situation which the government needed to address, and which led to a rise in spending. For instance, on goods and services, spending is budgeted to increase by 22%, subsidies and transfers by about 54% to 19 billion. Total spending will amount to about 73 billion. So what you'll now see is a slide of interest payments to revenue and expenditure, a ratio, which means that about 21 billion, 21.4 billion. So the next you'll see is the deficit to GDP ratio, which is now amounts to nearly about 12%. I think we don't see the deficit. A huge funding need this year already, and then we have a huge funding need next year as well as maturities come due, especially on the euro bonds and also domestic bonds, etc. So we will need to have our act together over the next few years, and the problem of what is now happening is we've got a surge in the debt to GDP ratio. I think you can maybe look for the slide called debt and guarantees as a percentage of GDP. Now, we're not saying, okay, there's the deficit, you can see, deficit to GDP ratio. The next slide would be the debt to GDP ratio, which is quite worrying. Now, we're not seeing Namibia in a debt trap yet. We don't have it yet, but it is looming. We're on the verge of a big debt crisis, actually. Now, any household, including the Namibian household as a whole, when you face a financial crisis, you have to fight the crisis and then recover from it. So currently this year, we're in a crisis situation. Let's make no bones about it. So what we are looking forward to seeing is what the Minister alluded to in the budget, to his long-term economic recovery and transformation plan that will hopefully be tabled together or just short of the budget in the third quarter. Mostly to the budget is the funding requirement. How big is it? Because the same people that pay the tax are the people that save and actually lend money to government. So what we I think would like to see in the plan, I list a few things there that you can actually see. I think the key things that is important in the plan going forward. But I think overall I could maybe call it and say I think the plan or the budget, second round that's coming, needs to basically say go for growth. We need the economy to grow again. Because if we've got growth, we have a creation of jobs. If we've got jobs, we've got tax income. So, yeah, let me stop there. My few comments, James.
Yeah, no, thank you, Floris. Yeah, I think something interesting you've mentioned is the budget deficit and the funding plan around it. I understand, or I believe that about 9.1 billion of that will be covered by cash reserves. In your view, what does the drawdown on cash reserves to that extent mean for the maturing euro bonds? I think the first tranche maturing in November 2019. Or 2021, my apologies.
21, yes. What I believe is, I think Minister will probably expand on that. The euro bond will probably have to be rolled rather than paid off. And I think the global situation currently with this downdraft in yields that we've seen everywhere gives us maybe an opportunity to roll it. Because to roll the euro bond would be at a 5 or 6% coupon, which is an attractive coupon in the global environment currently. It's only how the foreign investors will see the creditworthiness of Namibia. But I think we ought to be able to successfully roll the euro bond. Other than that, there's some other maturities coming up as well, but the domestic bonds that matures, we should possibly be able to switch into longer term maturities. I think there's space in the 6 to 7, 8 year area on the yield curve for new bonds to be issued. So I think it's manageable, doable currently, but we are in a predicament, not to emphasize it too much, to be the doom and gloom economist. I think there's always hope, and we hope we don't waste the crisis, as they say.
No, thank you, Floris. I also believe with the level of quantitative easing taking place, we have seen that there are also too much liquidity in good and bad places at the moment globally. So how that plays out will also, I think, be quite interesting. Considering what Floris has mentioned in terms of the pressure on revenue, it brings us to another very important topic of today's discussion, being taxes. And for individuals and businesses, one of the most significant sections of the budget are the implication of taxes, as it would directly affect their pockets. Cameron, as managing partner of EY and also quite the tax expert, what in your view are what have you and EY identified as the key tax implications that will and may affect the individual and business taxpayer?
Thanks, James, and also Minister. All the best for the rocky road that's ahead of us. I think you must trust that we are all here to help. So the first thing is that the good news is that we won't be paying more taxes. In fact, I'm wanting to ask the Minister if there isn't a possibility to reduce the taxes to get more money into the economy. I know we're going to maybe not collect what we planned, but sometimes a reduction in the tax rates is quite a good way to stimulate the economy. So that's maybe something the Minister can touch on. So the VAT rate is going to stay the same. The income tax rates are going to stay the same for us as individuals and companies. The other thing that the Minister must maybe also think about is we've had these same income tax rates for individuals since 2013. So there would have been people back in 2013 that didn't pay tax that are now paying tax at the bottom end of the income scale. And the question really is, are those people not really in need of having more disposable income to put back into the economy? And somehow they will obviously spend some money on VAT, and that's how I think the government will get some of the taxes that is due to the government. The other thing is that the Minister has made no bones about is that the more you're going to be earning, the more tax you're going to pay, but at least the rates are staying the same. Really just a demonstration that the viewers can see that the more you earn, the more tax you will pay, and which is one of the fair tax principles that we learn about when we. The best news for investors at this point, and that goes to the guys in the mining industry, is that the royalties that to pay for the right to explore and utilize the minerals of this country that belongs to all of us as Namibians. There was a proposal last year to say that deduction will not be, or that amount that they pay in respect of royalties will not be allowed as a tax deduction. Now, that was quite heavy in my mind on investors. It would have put us in a very uncompetitive position vis-a-vis all other countries where miners would invest. And I think that is very good news for investors. And I think that's what we need to start stimulating the economy. We need to have some certainty around proposals. The proposals have been in the pot brewing for quite a while. The EPZ legislation, which is going to be replaced by the Special Economic Zone legislation, has been there for a while. And I think people just need certainty as to what framework. If we know the rules of the game, we can probably have a very good game. But if we're uncertain, then people start doing things that they shouldn't be doing. And then the last thing, which has been in place since February already, so people don't have to be too worried about this announcement that the Minister made. You're already paying more for your alcohol and your cigarettes, and I know during the hard lockdown period, but at least the sin taxes should be flowing in as people queue up outside the liquor shops to buy liquor. Just on an average, those increases are about 4.4%, which is in line with inflation. So again, I think overall the Minister didn't have much room to maneuver, but let's hear whether he's got some good news for us as far as taxes go when it's his turn.
Thank you, Cameron. No, I think that's a very good overview and some interesting comments and considerations on the tax brackets that I think will be welcomed by many if implemented. Cameron, as expected, of course, social media is buzzing around the discussion on taxes. I've picked up on a question of two. The ITAS system, it's been fairly topical lately. Could you perhaps tell us, as one of the questions, what action should people be taking in relation to ITAS?
Well, I think we must all say to each other, I think it's a very good system, and we must encourage people to get onto the system. The days are past when people should be filing tax returns manually. It's really an easy system. So what should people be doing right now? Get yourself registered on the ITAS system. If you are not going to be registered there and you're going to take your tax return in manually, you're not going to be assessed, you're not going to get your tax back, you're not going to get a good standing certificate. And those are things, I think, looking forward to make the administration of tax significantly easier for us as taxpayers, for us as practitioners who help taxpayers, and I think the most benefit is going to be to the taxpayer. You are really assessed instantly. It's, I would say less than a minute and you get your assessment back. Of course, provided that you got all your other stuff done. So for now, and maybe we should be talking about that as well, the extension date. I don't know if that was going to be on your next question.
Yeah, Cameron, no, exactly. One of the interesting things, as I've mentioned, it's also almost moving on to the more current affair, and is trending as we speak on social media, is this tax extension. Maybe just some background to the viewers. An announcement was made 2 days ago by the Ministry of Finance to extend the deadline for the submission of the individual tax returns from 30 June to 30 September 2020. And our viewers are quite interested in wanting to understand what does this mean for them as employees and individuals.
Well, the first thing is you've got some more time to put your tax return in, but I would still encourage people to put their tax returns in as soon as possible. The main reason for this extension, and there I think the Minister needs to hear this, I don't think the communication about the implementation of ITAS was very effective. So many employers didn't comply with what they were required. Why didn't they comply? Because they didn't know what they had to do. So for now, you can't actually put in your tax return if your employer hasn't put in all your monthly PAYE returns with an Excel spreadsheet. So if we can get our communication improving and get everyone to focus in the same direction, I think a lot of the challenges that the Ministry of Finance and us as taxpayers are finding on ITAS will be eliminated. People will know what they do. I think if you know you've got to travel 60 kilometers on a piece of road because there's a sign that tells you what to do, then people generally comply. But if there's no sign, and I've been coming at a speed of higher than 60 and suddenly I get stopped by someone, I'm going to be very surprised. And I think a lot of employers have been caught by surprise, and people that have tried to put their tax returns in because the system doesn't allow them because the information isn't there. So so that's the one thing. I think the second thing that taxpayers should hear is you should be self-assessing, making your own tax calculation, and if you have to pay, the law still says you must pay 30 June. So there's no extension for payment, but there's extension for submitting the return. And I think it's a good gesture by the Ministry of Finance. I think we've got to get people on board to believe and buy into the system. And if they're going to have challenges, we're all human nature, we don't like change. So if I can fill in my form manually, that's going to be the easy thing. I need to be led, and it's got to be easy for me to do the computer thing. And I think we just need some time. All systems don't work 100% on day one. There will be challenges, and I think this was a good way to accommodate taxpayers' concerns.
Thank you, Cameron. I think the message is quite clear to our taxpayers. Get online, get onto the system. Don't forget to still pay your taxes by 30 June. And then also the message to employers and employees are fairly clear. Thank you very much for that good, very necessary update. Bernice, as Managing Director of Bank Windhoek, you are not only a member of the Bankers Association of Namibia, but you are also representing the largest lender in Namibia today on this panel. And I know people are very interested, once again, in hearing what the bank has to say. But before I jump into the banking side of things, what are your initial take on the budget, on the national budget as presented? Your first impressions, really.
Thanks, James. As discussed at length, this year's budget was tabled in an environment of crisis and against a backdrop of an unprecedented global pandemic. I'd like to thank the Honourable Minister and his team for doing this and for a job well done. Now, this also treads on the heels of 4 years of economic depression. The impact of this requires a united fight, as was mentioned by Honourable Minister Shimi in his budget speech. Worth noting, however, and Floris also touched on this, are the twin peaks in the budget, which are namely the highest debt to GDP, as well as the highest deficit ever. Now, just reflecting on that, the budget deficit for the 2020-2021 fiscal year is estimated at 12.5% of GDP. In addition to this, debt stock is estimated to rise to 119 billion, which equates to 69.6% of GDP. As we all know, corporate profits, including banks, are expected to plunge this year as job losses and wage reductions remain a key concern. But having said that, I do believe that we all need to be participants and do whatever we can to help consumers, businesses, and government weather this storm. And that requires that we remain calm amidst all this adverse communication around all the news around crisis. It's very important to remain calm, to remain sober, and also to look for opportunities, even in these times.
Thank you, Berenice. You've touched on something quite interesting, saying that we all need to be active participants in order for us to weather the storm. And that is really what I was speaking to earlier when I mentioned the interest in what the banks has to say. We have seen the central bank issuing a directive or directives to provide for some concessions for banks under COVID-19 or for COVID-19. The focus and the discussions has really been around what are banks doing and how are banks coming to the party and what are expected from banks in terms of the crisis. And in your view, are banks doing enough?
James, I can certainly say that banks have not been bystanders in this crisis. Through various payment holidays, restructuring of facilities, we've really gone as far as we can to assist our clients. Furthermore, we've also joined forces with the public sector in terms of just the alleviating or lessening the plight of vulnerable communities, as well as far as we have been able to, we've participated in efforts to constrain the spread of the virus. Whilst this is a challenging situation, we see this as an opportunity as well to show our customers especially that we understand their needs by supporting them throughout this crisis. But we must also realize that banks are custodians of public funds, of public deposits, and we can only assist in a responsible manner. Like with everything in life, there is always upside, and the upside in all of this is for us to demonstrate to customers that we are able to support them where we can, but we're also able to advise them around savings, around reduction of debt where that is warranted. And through this journey, we believe that we can build stronger relationships, trust-based relationships with customers. Relationships that sometimes demand us saying no when it's not the right answer for a certain client.
Thank you, Berenice. Having said that, and we've listened to Floris about the current and future state of the economy almost, and what we've seen this pandemic means globally is, or it introduces a lot of uncertainty, also in the financial sector, and considering the role banks are playing in the financial system and also the duty banks have in holding public deposits, what is your view, or what will the impact of this be on the banking sector in Namibia, in your view?
Well, James, given our role as providers of credit to both businesses and households, the banking system is very exposed to the real economy. Central banks globally, as we all know, have reduced interest rates significantly, and this has had an immediate adverse impact on bank revenue. In Namibia, to come closer to home, the repo rate has been cut twice by a cumulative 200 basis points since the outbreak of COVID-19, and this was amidst already subdued private sector credit extension. Fortunately, we have built a resilient banking system, or financial system rather, in the good times. Now, this may have seemed expensive at that point in time. However, it has been the better economic bet in the longer term, and it has stood us well thus far. But I must mention that no financial system can be infinitely resilient. We fully support the fact that monetary policies have been set to afford the business and household sectors the necessary cushion to adapt to the adverse impacts of COVID-19. We are in uncertain times that require prudent navigation and focus, but we are also in times where which do appeal to our humanity. The question I just want to pose, though, is when is cutting interest rates a cut too deep, given the unique structure and the vulnerabilities in the Namibian economy? So it's great that we can support businesses and households, but when is a cut too deep, and how do we respond to that?
Well, thank you, Berenice. Yeah, you're closing off with quite an interesting remark. And I think it speaks back to what Floris has mentioned in terms of pressures on revenue, which comes back to corporate taxes, if these revenues are being impacted. So we almost have this never-ending cycle of things and how they impact each other. The interdependence is really. But Berenice, coincidentally, or it's very coincidental, but I believe your question on interest rate cuts will most probably be answered to some extent by this morning's monetary policy announcement. I think it's scheduled for around 11. So it's also something to look forward to and for our audience to take note of. That will be happening at 11 this morning. Good. Yeah, Tatishimi, I see you have been taking notes vigorously during the discussion. Having been a seasoned central banker yourself and now as Minister of Finance, you are well versed in all or most of the topics discussed here this morning, I believe. And yeah, as the panel alluded to, you have taken office at a very difficult time and you had to deliver a budget amidst this perfect storm that I've mentioned. So it could not have been easy. The budget essentially speaks to mitigating the impact of COVID-19 to a large extent, but also touches on or emphasizes on the expenditure on economic and social upliftment programs. I know there are a number of open-ended questions that have been left by the panelists, but maybe as a start, in your view, what are the highlights you would like us and our audience to really take note of from the budget before you address the questions asked or left by the panel?
Thank you, James, and thank for inviting me to be here to participate in this very useful and productive discussion. Well, what we have presented in the budget is that we are, as it was already pointed out by the panelists, that we are in unprecedented or facing unprecedented times. We have already seen the chart that Flores was showing here that domestic growth has declined or is going to decline significantly this year. Already it's declining in nominal terms. So it means we are producing less than what we were producing in the previous period. And this is not only unique to Namibia, this is a global problem. As it was already pointed out, global growth is going to be negative this year. And that's a recent phenomenon. Up until February this year, the International Monetary Fund was still projecting a positive growth of 3% this year. It has now turned negative globally. If I look at the SACU country, our neighbors here, South Africa, Botswana, Lesotho, and Eswatini, those that are in the countries that are in the customs union, all those member countries are projected to register negative growth rates above 5%. All of them above 5%. And that equally applies to Namibia. So this is really an unprecedented crisis. It's not something that we have seen in our generation, and therefore it requires a united front. And I'm happy to say that the response that I have seen from all the Namibians, being individuals, companies, corporates, they have really embraced the need to work together to do what needs to be done so that we can build a united front that can propel us to move forward, because we can only move forward if we work together. And I strongly and I see that, and I greatly appreciate that. So given that scenario or that context where you have growth declining, we have tax income falling because tax comes from economic activities, and if economic activities are down, or subdued, that means the revenue is also falling, as we have seen from the charts that Cameron was showing there. So you now have a situation where revenue is falling, but you also have a situation where you have to respond to the pandemic. First of all, your health expenditure has to be increased, so for us to be able to support lives, making sure that we have enough protective equipments for our health officials, making sure that we have enough medications, making sure that we have enough facilities, because with this pandemic, you need to expand your facilities so that you can accommodate people who are going to be unfortunately affected by the pandemic. So you have a situation where your health expenditure is increasing. You also have a situation where you have to put in money into the economy. Because ideally, if you're in a crisis and the economy is contracting, it's government's role to pump money into the economy. And that's what we have attempted to do. We had the relief package, which is helping the most vulnerable people, especially the informal sector. You have heard about the emergency income grant. That was what was meant to enable those who have lost their livelihoods to have something, some bread on the table. We also at the same time trying to help some industries that have been negatively affected by COVID, such as the aviation and tourism sector. We have a wage subsidy for that. So you have that combination, revenue falling, expenditure has to increase to support livelihoods and jobs. And of course, the consequence is a bigger deficit, is a bigger debt. Going forward, is that sustainable? We said, no, that's not sustainable. Of course, obviously, we are in a crisis. We don't have any other choice. But going forward, the economy has to grow. Yeah, the economy has to grow so that we can get more revenue and be able to pay back some of the debt some of the money that we have borrowed. We should create more jobs so that we can get more people into the stream of the economic activities. That's one side. The other side is that we also now, this is, as I said in my budget statement, this is the time where we have to start looking at all our spending patterns and see where can we make some savings. So we have talked about, for instance, looking at subsidies that we give to some of our SOEs. Are these subsidies necessary? Are they productive? So that's one question we have started to look into. For instance, and another example, for instance, is also to look at, apart from subsidy, is also to look at the government medical aid. It's a very important benefit for government employees. The question, can we do it differently? Can we do it in a more efficient way so that this government spending on medical aid will not continue to run away, as it has been the case lately? And of course, the biggest elephant in the room is a wage bill, which is very difficult. Most people believe that government people are overpaid. I'm an example of that. I have seen that. So the problem is not really largely. It's largely not the level. It's more the number of people that you have in the system, and restructuring that will take a bit of time, but it's something that has to be done. So in terms of expenditure restraint, those are the areas where we think we can make some difference. Some in the short term, some will take a bit of time to get to the destination where we want to get to. So I believe those are some of the highlights in the budget that we have presented. Cameron talked about reducing tax. Yes, ordinarily, again, in a crisis, you will want to pump more money in the economy, but also depends on the level of your savings that you have. Because if you already have tax falling, you have the gap widening between revenue and expenditure. It's a bit difficult while you are on the battlefield to also cut taxes at the same time. So if you had enough saving, yes. But now, because as we have said already, James, we entered this crisis with a history of weak economic growth for about 5 years. And that means you didn't really have much space in terms of your fiscal policy to be able to pump in more, especially in terms of tax into the economy. So that's a constraint that we are facing. So let me maybe stop there and see whether there are some other questions.
No, thank you. Thank you, Tatishimi. I think, thanks a lot for sharing, and I appreciate sharing some of the things government that are looking at from their side in terms of restructuring expenditure, etc. Because I think in this crisis we have seen that businesses with transformation plans of 3 to 5 years have really had to fast track that into a period of 12 to 18 months. So I think everyone is relooking the way they look at cost. But what is quite interesting and what I think is quite good is that everyone around or on the panel actually agrees to the one common thing, and that in the long run we need to look for growth. Floris mentioned it in his discussion. You've also mentioned the growth factor, and then Bernice has also alluded to us working together and everyone coming together to get us through this crisis. And something worth mentioning, I believe, is also the way we have responded as a country, and I would like to commend the government and also the private sector with how they've come together in terms of the social income grants and distributing that and getting that out to the people as quickly as they did. I think it is really a commendable effort by everyone involved and something that we can be proud of. So, I think we can also ask the audience and our viewers or give them time to ask a few questions. I've seen a number of very positive comments, so I think that is a good sign. Just one or two questions that we can perhaps touch on is, in order to stimulate an economy, you need to make it an attractive investment opportunity. What would make Namibia an attractive or preferred investment option when looking at the region? And Cameron, is perhaps something I can throw to you that can also cover some of it from a tax perspective. So what are your take on that?
I would say certainty on the rules. I must know what I'm letting myself in for. I'm not looking for benefits that other people shouldn't be entitled to, but I must have certainty that if I invest, I'm going to be able to get a return that will match wherever else I go. And if I look at Namibia, we've got very good infrastructure as far as roads and telecoms go. Our systems are working. So somehow we need to convince people that this is the country that they should invest in. The minister and comes from a previous announcement already that the manufacturing incentives will be withdrawn. I'm not so sure that that's the best way to go. I think, again, communication between the two ministries could probably have been better to look at Vision 2030 and say which are the industries we want to have in this country and encourage those people, the foreign investors or locals, to invest in those specific industries and give them the benefit to make sure that there is a return on the investment. So I would say the most important thing is for me the certainty on the rules. And there are currently significant uncertainties to attract someone to come here as opposed to maybe going to Botswana or Angola or South Africa.
Thank you, Cameron. Tatishimi, anything you would like to add, or Floris?
Floris can go first, yeah.
So from an investor point of view, we as Capricorn Asset Management, we are not investing our own money. We're investing other people's money. Like Berenice mentioned, we're custodians of savers. So we pool savings of lots of people and firms, etc. And we try and act on their behalf. So an investor would look at what we call the basic risk-return equation, right? There are certain risks that one can identify, some that you can't, and for a certain level of risk, we need a certain level of return. That is why in risk less investment, or the lower the risk, like in money market, etc., we've got lower interest rates. The higher the risk, the higher the interest rates go, or the required return, so to speak. So in this equation into risk, lots of factors go. And we do not need an unnecessary level of risk that we can actually manage down, because business entrepreneurs are exposed to lots of varied risks to start off with, right? Business is a risky endeavor. So whatever we can do to bring down the perception of the risk would be good. And that is why I think the plan, or the, let's call it the plan that's coming, or the policy framework that's coming, I think we need to not be too ambitious and try to rewrite all the rules and reinvent the wheel. We need to make a reasonably good plan and implement it quite quickly. Because a reasonably good plan implemented is better than a perfect plan coming a year down the line, which may be too late.
Maybe I can just add, James, that first of all, you mentioned that there has been, some kind of a teamwork spirit between the corporate sector and the public sector, and which is also something that I have mentioned before, which is something that we greatly appreciate. And I think going forward, that's how we need to work together to transform the economy. And Bank Windhoek, of course, was one of our partners when we were rolling out the emergency income grant. In fact, we are still rolling out the emergency income grant. There are still some people that have to be paid. And again, we greatly appreciate that support from our business entities, from Bank Windhoek in particular. So let me thank Bernice, while she's here, for the support that we have received from the bank. And also the point that she made earlier on, that having a resilient banking system is critical, because if you have a banking system which is weak, the whole economy is going to be in disarray. And having a banking system that is still able to provide, working capital to corporates, to SMEs, it's important to keep the economy alive, and it's important to help the economy to recover. So we would like, now coming back to what needs to be done. I think first of all we will have to start thinking about how do we recover from the COVID-induced recession, so to speak. So that's one. So the growth plan should have those two components. So how do we recover, and how do we transform the economy going forward? Because obviously we cannot continue to rely on traditional sources of growth. For instance, mining, for instance, has been one of the sectors that have been driving the economy, especially in terms of exports. But we now need to diversify. So together, as Namibians, individuals and corporates, we need to have that conversation. We will come with a draft plan that we are going to present to our stakeholders and say, this is what we think. What do you think as a business? Where do you see the opportunities? What should be the government's role? Because government's role is not to be driving the business. Government's role should be to create that environment for the business, to exploit the opportunities that are there. So that's a conversation that we want to have with our corporates. That's a discussion that we want to have with our investors, both domestic, and then of course charity starts at home. We want to start here, and also foreign investors. But before we do that, we also need to make sure that we clean up the house. We should identify the inefficiencies in terms of our processes. In terms of, if you want to set up a business, how many stages do you have to go through before you get registered? Things like that. How do we improve the ease of doing business? So I think definitely we will start that conversation again, and I'm sure I'm looking forward to all your input in that regard.
Thank you very much, Tatishimi. Our viewers, we've unfortunately run out of time, but I think the message from the panel this morning is that we need to work together as a country, and all stakeholders need to come together, and we need to focus on growth going forward for the Namibian economy. So that's a wrap. I want to thank all our panelists and everyone for tuning in and participating in the Capricorn Group and EY Annual Budget Review. From me, James Chapman, have a very productive week and stay safe. Thank you.
From the very beginning, you strive for more. Trying to walk before your body can hold you and never slowing down once you find your feet. You spend hours playing in the street, collecting bruises, scars, and memories. And you grow up faster than most would like, spending hours dancing, laughing, and learning every lesson you can. You march into the real world ready for anything anyone can throw at you. You fly past life's milestones, building businesses, families, and lasting relationships, driven to make the most of your life. No matter your journey, we are here with you every single step of the way, because yours is a relationship worth banking on. Bank Windhoek, a member of Capricorn Group.